before we start, I would like you to tell me something about myself. Okay. So, what I do for a living, I started my career around 11 years back as a Java J2E developer. I primarily worked on full stack telecom applications, which ranged from interactive voice response systems, from text-to-speech engines, natural language speech recognition, etc. And after really spending around countless, I don't even remember how many months or years now in their freezing data centers, I decided that I need to go to a comfortable office, and I started doing solution architecture, which is a rather very comfortable job. But then my endless research and in the cocoon that I was in the telecom full stack applications, I really did not realize what else is out there in the world, and I started researching on different stacks and different technology options. And that is when I came across a lot of things. I started a lot of new initiatives in my company, Entity Data. I have been with them right after my college, and since then, the reason I'm still with them, people hear, you're 11 years with the same company? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, because I get to do something new every year. So I started the Big Data Analytics Initiative in Entity Data. Then I started their enterprise social platforms, not only for them, but also for their customers. I made the gamification engine for them. We had a lot of success with that. And then now, most recently, I've started exploring the world of IoT. And that's pretty much why I'm here today, because when I started exploring IoT, I really found out there is a big gap between developers and business use of things and what the whole Internet of Things that corporate is talking about. So it's very important for us to take up this topic in developer conferences and bring up developers to the same speed as UX designers, and bring UX designers and architects on the same playing field as developers in certain cases. So these are the two best ways to reach me. After, if you have any questions offline, I would definitely take up a few questions later today. But in case I'm missing anything, just tweet to me or send an email. Now, before I move forward, I really want to know who is there. I sort of have an idea, but I just want to test my hypothesis here. How many of you are developers here? Awesome. How many are related to UX or do something with UX? Not bad. Great. And how many PM, people who lead scrums and do any sort of activities? Good, good, not bad. And then anybody with a startup, thinking of a startup? Good. I think I've got my mix here. Anybody else whom I missed out in this session? Okay, good. So I think I have got content for all of you. Now, have you heard of IoT? Show of hands again. Yes? Yes. Okay, good. And design thinking. My UX friends did raise their hand. How about developers? Have you heard of design thinking? Yes, a few of you. But not many, and not everybody who raised their hand for the first time. And that's pretty much, when you are talking about design thinking and IoT together, I don't think that has been talked about as much. And this needs a conversation, and I'm hoping to start this conversation. I've seen a few people write blogs about it, but not really a consolidated conversation in the industry about design thinking and IoT together. And I think I'm starting that off in today's conversation. I would want all of you to engage with me and take this even further if you think that it is as important as I do. Now, what am I going to share today? First of all, of course, just for the people who have what I think of IoT and what I think of Internet of Things. And then what is the playing field here? What are some of the issues that are related to this whole field of IoT? How can design thinking help in that? And then how to design think for IoT? Because it's even for the people who have been trained on design thinking, who do that for designing products, developing softwares, managing teams, etc. There is a little bit, there are a few subtle differences when you are thinking about IoT, and what are those differences is something that we are going to cover as well. Why should you care? First, because there is a lot of ambiguity in this field. Like any nascent field, there are very few successful examples. There are your users have no clue about what they want. Of course, they have never lived the smart way of life. So you are making products for them. You are hypothesizing what they are going to like, etc. So you have nobody to ask to what you really want and to get feedback on the things that you make. And then you are not just a coder now. Just like as I started, nobody expects you to just keep coding and keep picking up user stories or developing code from the requirement documents. So in the future, and as I've seen, like a lot of companies in the last 2 or 3 years have been asking their developers to take this role of coder plus plus, where they're not just coders, they're actually sitting with design teams. There is mob programming coming up. There is a lot of things being done uselessly, or there's some of the concepts being misused. But still, there is a lot that is being asked of developers. And that is why it is important for developers to know this option, because that would really help you to lead such a responsibility. And of course, the starter-uppers. For that remote chance, of course, there are a few people who are associated with startups here, but for all those who are not, for that 1% chance where you would be associated with a startup, it's very, very important thing to note of, so that you can ward off any issues that we would be seeing in a little while. So let's start. First of all, let's see what a thing on internet according to me is. It is any physical object which is uniquely identifiable by its own IP address or any sort of identifier, and has a sensor or an actuator attached to it. It can transmit data on internet or cloud, or even in some of the options where they don't really need to be online, but it's still through low Bluetooth energy or Wi-Fi options, they can still communicate. And then the data can be aggregated, processed, analyzed, and acted upon. This is what industry-wide people think, that these are the 4 characteristics which say that something is smart. So it could be any smart thing, like a coffee maker which texts you when your coffee is perfectly brewed. But is this really Internet of Things? This is a smart device, but it really doesn't make the whole internet. A lot of coffee makers like that wouldn't really be of use either to the user or to even to the company, etc. So that is where I say that Internet of Things is a little different. It's a highly orchestrated network of sensors which can communicate with each other, which can also not only the users can take action on them, they can also take some autonomous action by themselves. But why is there a certain hype about this whole thing? Of course, there are people who you would see those infographics where they're telling that, okay, there are going to be, by 2020, so many things, by 2050, there are going to be so much of data, etc. I don't want to give the credit of IoT to them. That's not why you should care about IoT. The whole IoT revolution has really come because of the advancement in telecom and bandwidth. And these are very important points to take note of, because when you are analyzing a space as big as this, when you are coming up with an idea, you have to think what has made it possible and what are some of the things that you should care about. Of course, the whole smartphone tsunami that we had, the nanofication of chips, sensors, and devices, the things which were getting smarter anyways, right? For example, cars, I don't know how many of you know, but since like 2008 or something, we have that dongle in the car which can transmit data. Nobody was talking about Internet of Things at that time, but doesn't mean that the things didn't exist or could not really communicate. And then, of course, the software perspective. Two big things that made Internet of Things very much possible were, of course, cloud and big data analytics. Or, as I like to think, maybe Hollywood, right? A lot of IoT developers and enthusiasts were inspired by IoT. Take it Terminator or Avatar. I don't know how many of you remember this tree, or this whole island. It was a whole connected world of things, right? Where you could communicate with other animal or plants just by attaching a sensor or a variable on yourself to the trees, and you could communicate large amount of data in real time. I mean, pretty much an example of connected world. So hopefully Hollywood will continue to inspire IoT enthusiasts, but according to me, these were the things that really brought IoT into picture. And now, when it started, it had no stopping. So if you cannot see something here, please don't blame your eyes for that. It's by design. And this is a little old picture. It's not up to the date, but you can see how many people are trying to do IoT at different layers, at application, product, or service layers. Everybody is trying to make that killer product which would establish them as market leader. And they have made a lot of things here. They have made things in every walk of life, from smart cities products to wearables to connected home to other appliances, etc. But this revolution is really getting big, and that's why I think every developer should at least know about it, if not actively working upon it, because there are going to be intersection points that you are going to see in your career very soon. So, but all these people are creating these things. So let me ask you, do any of you use such smart things that people are creating? For example, this smart toothbrush, which tells you when did you last brush your teeth, when should you brush it again. It can send a report to your dentist about whether you are sticking to his advice or not. Anybody is using these? Oh, you have one. OK, we have one. OK, great. And then the egg tray, which can really tell you which of the dozen of eggs that you bought has really gone bad, which you should not use today. No, people are, and these are big companies who are putting their money on it, please. Then there is a toaster, which depending on the texture of the bread and the person who's putting it will toast it according to that person's personalized settings. And then there is the smart fork. It tells you how fast you eat, when were you eating, et cetera, and what should you change in your eating habits. So people are making all these things. So anybody here is using these, or your close family? I know that toothbrush, we got one, which is a good yay for me. But anything else people using here, or your immediate friends or family? Why not? Any guesses? Why do you think those things are not being used? Yeah.
In many cases, they don't seem to be solving actual problems. Like we're inventing new problems to solve, essentially.
Good. Good. Anything else? Yep. Good. Anything else? Yep. Good. And what if you don't have Wi-Fi, right? Yep.
They don't really bring much value into anyone's life?
Yep.
Like marginal value?
Yes. So actually, yes, go ahead.
This is one I saw on Twitter that was kind of funny, but I don't want to have to be able to have to do a software update to use half those things. Like I don't want to have to sit there and wait for the field to brush my teeth.
Right. That's true.
I also don't want to charge my fork.
So true. Okay, great. And those are a few things we will touch upon today. But yes, a company, FNOVA, I believe, they did a research on thousands of people, and they actually found out why people are not using it. And some of the things that you guys said, it's really one of the first things was that they definitely don't perceive the value. They don't think they're adding really value to their life. They are not even, of course, price is a point. They're too expensive, and they feel that these things are gimmicky, if for anything. And just because they are not getting the return on investment on these things. Other things, of course, are security, privacy. People are really scared about the fact that what if machines take control? I don't want my wine bottle not to open because I've had more than 5 glasses this week. So, so people are not ready for such things as well. And as I was reading about this, I found that there were a few startups which did something great. They actually went and found out after failing, why did they fail? So there's this person called Yash Kotak, and I really respect this guy. His article, 7 Reasons Why My IoT Failed, I think is a good lesson for any startup, IoT or not. But he actually laid out why his startup failed and why such IoT startups failed. And he said that these were the top 3 reasons why he thought his startup failed. First of all, understanding of user, lack of due diligence, and defining the problem for the target users. So he actually laid down 7 things. I thought these were the 3, and because other things were really about marketing, business plan, etc. I thought these 3 things were the most important where you actually started on the wrong foot. And mistake number 1, as he says, we were neither experts nor target users of the product that we were building, which is pretty much, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that any startup does. Second, we did not do the due diligence on the idea before we started building the product. Third, mistake 6, we were trying to do everything for everybody. They did not really define their target user or what should be the section of the users for which they should be targeting their application. So while I was doing my research on, I would say at that time, social gamification and this whole digital buzzword coming up, and that's pretty much when IoT started picking up, started coming up on hype cycles, etc. This is one of the things that I found, that users' needs and technologists' wants, if they don't have to overlap, they at least have to meet at a certain point for making things successful. And in IoT, these kind of products, these were actually going abroad. And I talked to a lot of startups in Baltimore, Maryland, and as well as in NTT Data itself. I talked to people who are great architects. But all of them almost always agree that this is a gap that they almost always see in any failure that happens. And that's where I was also, I started actually, I was part of certain corporate crowdsourcing kind of projects. And then I started learning about design thinking. And I thought that what if people apply design thinking here? Design thinking seems to at least relieve a little bit, if not completely, these issues. So what design thinking really does is it actually makes sure that whatever product you are building is actually viable for your business, it's desirable by your users, and feasible for the technology. And that's where the true innovation happens, or the successful innovations happen. By design thinking, at least it promises, and I have been part of at least now 3 projects which have used design thinking approach and made things, where you actually strive to get the perfect balance of form, fit, and function. You don't make things just because they look beautiful. You don't make things just because they are completely working and they have solved the next biggest technological issue. They are not just great concept, a business model that would disrupt the industry. You actually try to merge them together and try to come up with solutions which are actually the perfect form. I want all of you to have a look at this picture for at least like 5 seconds. I know it was less than 5 seconds, but but the reason I showed you that picture and I wanted all of you to think about it was understand this balance of form, fit, and function. This is not new. This is not something that we are only talking in this century or even in this decade. This has always been there. People have made great products because they understood the need very well, even in 18th century. So it's not a new concept, but I think it needs this conversation, especially in terms of in the whole Internet of Things, because the products are new, the user needs are changing, and those changing needs have to be recaptured. And that's something that where most of the technological startups are missing the point. So for those of you who really go by definitions, here is something that I've tried to compile from various internet sources. And so according to this definition, design thinking is an approach to solving wicked problems by understanding user needs and developing insights to solve those needs, resulting in an aha experience not only for the users, but also for creators and stakeholders. Now, if you just remember this definition and see the words that are there, just the highlighted words, I think that is enough for you to guide through the process, or at least start on right foot on the design thinking. This is the simple guide. So I have tried to expand on that. First of all, why do you have to do design thinking? First, the simple reason is because you want to understand users' needs and develop insights. Where do you do it? Do you do it for every other problem that you are trying to solve in your projects? No, only for the problems which are wicked. And what do they mean by wicked problems? The problems which have not really been solved through traditional means, for which you do not have an example in history. The problems which you have solved multiple times, but you have never really been able to successfully solve them completely. Those are really the wicked problems. And then what should it result into? When should you say that, okay, you have perfectly imbibed design thinking? When it has created that unique experience, not only for your users, but also for your team. The team is energized to not only finish this particular product very well, but also to take up the next one. So what design thinking is not? It is definitely not firefighting, quick fix, and band-aid kind of situation, where you have a production bug which you need to solve by next release in a week or maybe sometimes in hours, and you think that you will do the design thinking approach. Not a good idea, or at least not at all a feasible idea. You shouldn't think of such situations which need to be solved in a few days or hours. Second, when you're creating problem for the given answer. I think the gentleman there said that all those products were actually trying to create to devise a solution even if there was a need or not, just because they had some technology available at their hand. That is also not a good place where you should think of. For example, I was just talking to these extra enthusiast developers in Baltimore, and there was somebody who talked about a sensor which could actually measure nail growth. That is something that they were working in healthcare field, and they needed it, the patients needed it, but this guy is like, oh, this now we can make a device, a wearable for girls who can actually wear it, and then they would know when is the next time for manicure. And I was like, yeah, okay, good luck moving with that idea. But really, if you have a technology available, do not try to use it for making a public-facing user product, right? Third is quick response to competition. Company A has built this, now we need to respond to them in next quarter. How do we do that? If you start with that statement with your team on design thinking, it's not going to go very far. The next is when you put all your technical and business skills aside, and you totally worship design thinking being the sure shot formula that will get you the next business success. That is also not something right to expect of design thinking. So once we have learned what design thinking is, what it is not, I think now we want to actually see what it, because the people who had not heard of design thinking, I think it's important for them to know what's the process, how does it look like, etc. So there are various schools of thoughts, and when I say schools, it is literally schools because most of the design thinking approaches actually came from universities. They came from Stanford Design School, Darden School of Business, and some of the others came from IDEO and other educational firms. So if you go the Google route on design thinking and try to find out how to do it, etc., you would be flooded with the amount of models that are there, the variety of them, the toolkits that are there, etc. I would say don't get bogged down by that. Choose and pick up whichever image you like best, and from there start it off. It's really important for you to start the process rather than to understand it completely, become an expert in it, and then do it. Just like software developers always do. Download a library, try it out, and then go ahead. You don't need to research everything that exists in the world to really start this process. So, and why I think the models don't matter? Because all of the models that you see in design thinking actually focus on these 4 goals. All of them talk about understanding the user, radical brainstorming, rapid experimentation, and then co-creation and collaboration. These are the 4 things all of them talk about. So it doesn't really matter how they have divided their steps, whether they have 5 or 6 steps in their process. Although all of any model that you take up should actually have this this particular secret. So, or if I have to rephrase it, right? The secret sauce of design thinking actually needs these 3 things. First, the mindset, which is really your ingredient in my design thinking. You cannot do design thinking with people who are not enthusiastic, who don't feel really like working today, etc. You really need to have the design thinking mindset imbibed in your team. That's most important. The process, which is the actual recipe of design thinking, you have to be very mindful of that particular process. And then the utensils, which is like really the tools. And we are going to talk about each of these, what do they mean and what do you need to get in place. And we are going to talk about those subtle differences in IoT that you need to take care of, because everybody can tell you about design thinking, or any expert in design thinking can tell you about that. But really how in IoT projects, what should you take care of is something that we will talk today. So first of all, and for the purposes of today's discussion, we will take the Stanford's D School's design thinking model. So the D School models, the mindset says that, of course, the user experiences and everything that you do has to remain human-centered. You cannot think in terms of making problems technology-centered, making problem business-centered, revenue-centric, etc. They have to remain human-centered. Bias towards action. So as much as design thinking is called thinking, it's just a misnomer. There is one mode where you have to be really get to thinking, but most of it, etc., is like really getting down into the weeds, doing the action, moving quickly to the next step, etc. So there is a bias towards action. So there are more prototypes created than meetings done in a true design thinking team. Show, don't tell. What really that means is you don't have to write big documents, user manuals, etc. to get your prototypes or products tested. Your prototypes, let the users test them, you just record their reactions. Next is craft clarity, and this one is extremely important for IoT because design thinking has been proven to actually solve such ambiguous problems, so and bring clarity to clouded spaces. So and any time wherever you are stuck, either with your team, most of the times it's with the team rather than the users, the focus should remain on bringing clarity to it. Second is radical collaboration, and then culture of prototyping and experimentation, mindful of process. All these 3 things I think go together, because radical collaboration is of course needed for any mode in the design thinking. In the first mode, where you are actually trying to understand the user, you may need a few lesser people. You don't need the whole team on the ground. But as much as I have experienced and I have experimented, I have found that even getting the developers with the users helps, because as much diverse your team is, as much your I would say cross-functional your team is, the more benefits you see, the more perspectives you see coming into your products. And then culture of prototyping and experimentation. The whole DevOps world, microservices world really comes to closure here. Of course, when you're initially prototyping, making mockups, etc., not really. But after that, every release, every thing you do has to be very quick. I was attending the earlier session today morning, I think it was on DevOps, and where people said that you have to ship anyways, anytime, and if it requires really commenting down your code and make it developer specific so that everybody has a context, I think that's a very important design thinking principle that is also being applied to software development. So, and mindful of process. At any place, whenever you are in the project, you should know what your next step is, and from this step, what is your goal? So that if your team is not able to achieve that, you can quickly get them to that point. Tools, you will see a lot of them. When I say lot, it is like, at least I tried to count them for each of the steps, and it was above at least 56, just if I go by a few top models, like 3 of the most popular models. So we will cover a few of them today and what you can do. But I would say that if you have any questions on tooling, on how to get really this framework started, do write to me. I will let you know about that. So let's start with the process. This is, as I said, Stanford D School's design thinking process. It just let me see if I have, how much time do I have to go through? Okay, so we will cover this quickly, but these are the 5 modes that design thinking, the Stanford design thinking process asks you to do. The first one is empathy, so before I go ahead, you would see that a lot of you might feel that this is actually waterfall, you do steps one by one. That's actually not the truth. In real design thinking projects, what you would see is that there is a lot of iteration that's happening between any of these phases. So what do these phases or modes actually mean? So the first mode is empathize. It really means that its goal is first to understand the people within the context of your design challenge. You try to answer the way they do things and why, their physical and emotional needs, how they think about their reality, and what is meaningful for them. If you have answer to these 4 questions about the broader design challenge or the product that you are trying to evaluate, if you have answer to these 4 questions, you have pretty much done, you are done with understanding your user. But as any experienced user researcher will tell you, this is the most difficult part. So that is where the tools come in picture. Mostly everybody agrees that these are the 3 types of techniques that work. You observe the user sitting away from them, and you try to see what they really do, how do they really go about their activities, etc. The next is engage, where you actually interview the user, talk to them, ask them questions, etc. The third is immersing yourself in their context, where you actually live the life of the user that you are trying to design for. So interviews, so these are some of the tools that I have laid down. First of all, interviews. These are at the minimum basic that you can do and you can get started with your design thinking approach. There are a lot many, but at least at a minimum you should do these. First is interviews. You should really have conversations with your users rather than just having questions and checklists and making sure that you've covered everything. Next is empathy map. So this becomes important and is best filled when you have had a conversation with your user. If you ask users questions, why do you do this, what do you do this, etc., and you will get certain answers which you can note down. But what you really have to find out from those things is what they say, what they're telling you as a fact, what they think, because they would have used certain words like, I think it should be like this, what they really feel when they say, okay, they feel frustrated, they feel happy, they feel sad, they don't feel wanted by this, etc. you have to make notes of you have to make notes of those sentences. And then what they actually do. So the best of the user insights actually come from when you try to find out the discrepancy between what they really say and what they actually do. So they might tell you, oh, this particular product that I'm using is pretty simple. I get it done. I get done my process in like 5 seconds. That's fine. But what you would actually, when you just observe them and see, if you try to like match your insights, you would see, oh, somebody has actually put a workaround which makes them do things faster. Somebody has put a hack in. And for IoT, those are the things which are very important. You have to find out what are the workaround or hacks that people have put into place. Those workarounds and hacks will actually give you insights for the new product. So what are the IoT considerations? First, observe the user in the non-smart world. Do not consider the UI in isolation. You are not just designing the user experience in IoT. IoT especially, so smartphones for one thing, the apps for one thing, but as any user experience person would tell you, they were actually minification of the browser that we actually did on the smartphones. IoT is bringing in a whole different beast in the market. The screens, it's not just about screen sizes. It's about the service, the support. As somebody said here, I don't want to be doing a software update on my toothbrush, right? I don't want to be, the user does not want to be bothered about that. The whole service service design side of things. So UI is not, even for the user experience people, that is where I find them struggling most, because they have been trained to do good user experience design, but not really good service design or not really good, other sort of things that come into IoT. For example, they were never thinking about security, privacy kind of questions in interviews before. They were not even considering that aspect of things. But since users are finding that as a problem, that has taken a new dimension for the UX people. Do not, and that's pretty much the next point, do not focus on functional requirements only. They are your main focus, but now user experience people would have to go to that next level of knowing about the security issues, knowing about the technology issues, and trying to bring that in the conversation with the users. With that, we move on to the second mode, which is define. You basically, what you do is you capture all your findings, all the user research you have done, you bring it back, the team sits together, and you all make a consolidated problem statement. You craft a meaningful and actionable problem statement, point of view for your project. So the tools are basically, people generally call it problem statement, or even they can use a few UX tools for that, but basically these are the two. Again, I am talking only about the minimum things that you should do. When you are trying to define your product, at least have these, or your project for the product, at least have these two statements clarified. First, who is your user? Personify him. Give him adjectives. For example, Alice, the software programmer who wants to work only in the night. Needs, then you give the actual needs that Alice has, is in a way that, and then you tell the goal that you are trying to achieve for that user. If you have crafted this statement right, you are almost close to your defining your target audience as well as the problem that you are trying to define. The next is, once you do that, it is pretty easy to come up with this how might we statements. Because now you have said the user needs something. So Alice, the software programmer, say, needs an environment where she feels that it's still night. So now how might we create a virtual environment which still feels night? How might we actually remind Alice through alerts, etc., that it is night, not day, etc. I'm just making it up, as you can see. But this is where once you define the needs, it is very easy for now you to ask the questions and then see whether IoT is the right solution for that particular problem or not. So that's also So there are a lot of things that people do. First of all, storytelling within the team. They do the journey mapping for the users and personas, all pretty standard UX techniques. But at the end of it, you should be able to have an actionable problem statement. IoT consideration, go back to the user for problem statement validation. Why do I say that? Is mostly because the user has never been used to this smart way of living, right? So even if after understanding their needs and what do they need, etc., still go back to them, and this is not done in standard design thinking often, is that you actually go back and say that, okay, I have done, I'm thinking of this idea for you, is it really going to help you or not? Doing that, again, validation is important. Second is, create how might we question, again, for non-functional requirements. I'm again bringing the technology, security, privacy side of issues into design thinking. Generally, UX people are not used to doing this. Stay away from fiction. Record needs accurately. What I really mean by that, the team, and when you really have a very passionate discussion with the team after empathize mode, there are a lot of ideas that come in everybody's mind, and depending on the bias of people, they try to define the problem in their own way. And that's where things go a little out of hand. You might again think of, oh, the user actually has so much of problem but really never told me. They never really realized that this could be so powerful for them, etc. So that is where I think, again, you need to put a leash on it and see if map it correctly. Whatever has been recorded in the interviews was validated with the users is only what you are going to design for. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to stop your creative mind. You don't have to think about innovation. You do, but you will know what is your minimum viable product going to be, which is going to be liked by users. And then you put innovation on top of it and test it again with users. See whether they like the needs that they had, or they like the features that you had. There is no problem with that, but at least go with first cut off the things that they want to have in the product. Next is ideation. To a lot of people, it looks like brainstorming, but it is rather more structured. It is really about creating a volume and variety of ideas to solve all those how might we questions that you would have listed down during your define phase. So just, and at this point, I let my team really go wild and think about anything and everything. At this point, you don't judge. You really don't give your judgment on whether this idea is going to work or not. You just let people create ideas. Brainstorming is a very traditional technique. You then, whatever you have brainstormed, you put them in mind maps. You look at, and so this is a very important point. Look at existing solutions. Learn from the parallel worlds. And then you create nodes, clouds, etc. For the IoT, oh, that numbering is wrong, sorry. So ideate with cross-functional teams. That is extremely important here. You have to get not only your marketing, business, sales team, which are going to sell the product, but also your security teams, your infrastructure, cloud teams, etc., who are now going to think about how your products, so this does not remain in the UX space alone. For IoT, that software update part is really important. Battery power usage part is really important. So those things have to be put into perspective as well. Do not solve and research in this mode. Don't try to, if somebody has said that, okay, we would use this particular type of software update mechanism or maintenance mechanism for the product. Do not try to shoot them down here. Learn from the parallel universes. Again, this is very, very important for IoT. There could be products that are existing not in the totally smart way that you are thinking of, but learn from them, see what features can you export from there. Next is prototype. This is really to create a physical form of your idea and to allow people to experience and interact with them. You basically try to learn and explore. At this point, there would be some people who are passionate about a particular way of solving, etc. So you try to solve disagreements and miscommunication and try to get on that minimum viable product for your company. And you try to get the focus of the team there. You start the conversations about next features, all the ideas that had come on in the last phase and which had to be backlogged. They are more innovative, more creative, but you can start the conversation about them and start doing user research on them. Fail quickly and cheaply. This is the most important part of the design thinking. So and that's why I advocate this for startups mostly, because I think it's very important for them to know this early on if a particular idea is going to stick or not, whether it is time for it right now or not. And then break large problem into small testable parts. If you are making a big, if you are making a whole this smart toothbrush, say for example, just try to get on this schedule where you are entering times for the users and see whether they really like to know if their dentist can see this report or not. So just test the report by itself. You can, so that could be, or the software update part of it. Whether they would like to hit a button on it, they would like it to be automatic, they would want their consent for it at all or not. Try to test these things in separation. Lot of things, tools being used for this: sketching, physical mockups, wireframes, interaction flows, storyboards, prototyping. Basically, anything that can let the users visualize your idea, interact with it, and provide your feedback. What are the IoT considerations for prototype? Have a clear test goal for each of the prototype that you are building. Do not test variables in isolation. For example, if you are right now testing for software update, do not just think about it at that point. I mean, do think about the software update. You might be testing the frequency right now, but you have to consider, say, for example, its correlation with the battery usage. Does the update require the similar kind of battery usage, et cetera, or not? So even though you have to have a clear test goal, whether this is a pass or a fail prototype, but you also need to know what else has to be tested in this particular cycle. Time box prototype building. It is very important. I think you have to stop on time. You have to put certain things on hold if required. But this is where I see my young innovators really struggling, is where they get into these long cycles of developing, debugging, et cetera. So time box prototype building. Whatever you have built it till then, put it in the hands of user. Think how the user will test even before you put it in their hands, so that you can provide the features for them to test it well. And then the goals of test is to really solicit the feedback on the prototypes by putting them into the context of use, refine the prototypes and solutions, learn more about the user, because I've seen a number of times, okay, people were not used to living smart way of living. Now they are. So now you have given them, now they want something else on top of it. So this continuous cycle of understanding, the more features for a product can only come in when you do this frequent prototyping and testing. Refine your point of view as well. There might be a few features that might be going into your product newly because of this newfound research. So what are the tools and techniques that could be used for this phase? People, of course, your MBA friends can really help you here. These are desirability, feasibility, viability testing, which we are all not used to so much in software development world, but I think sales and marketing have been doing it for long, and I think it's a good thing to learn from them, even for the products that you are trying to make. Mode 5. For the test itself, the IoT considerations, of course, show, don't tell, the principle itself, it especially comes in handy with the devices that are new for the users, the form factors which they have never seen, how they are reacting to it. So record their reactions, which is the second point. So till now, a lot of us are just in that JUnit testing mindset, right? Where you say that whether a test is green or red, it's pass or fail. You have to go beyond that in IoT especially, because that is only when you can uncover new features that users may need, the things that are required. Test with the new set of demographics, but still the same target audience. This is a personal learning for me. Sometimes we keep going back, and even though we don't want to call these focus groups, but we keep going back to these focused users who have tested or seen your prototypes a lot of times, and now they have a better understanding of things, and you put it into the hands of totally different person, and you start seeing a new perspective coming in. And that's where it is very important that you keep your target audience, your demographics defined still, that if you are making for a working mom of teens, still make it for working mom of teens, but try with a different mom this time. So that's pretty much a personal learning that I had there. So these were the process and all the IoT considerations for design thinking that we should pay heed to. I will also post the link of this on SlideShare so that you can take a detailed note of this. But then this is what I really want you all to do, is that at least start it out. Do not just listen to it and forget it. It is really important that you try it in the next IoT project that you do and see the marked differences that you get out of it. So how do you start? You can start it anywhere before you start prototyping your next idea or in your current project. But remember, you have to solve it for wicked problems. You cannot solve it for where to put that next button. It has to be novel enough to be solved by design thinking. And the most important part, I have seen this a number of times, until unless your team is enjoying it, you won't see the success with design thinking or any other type of approach that you take for user validation. So with that, sorry I had to run a little bit in the end because of the time crunch, but if you have any questions, please do send them across to me. I would be happy to take them either on Twitter or on email, and we also have the conversation on the mobile app, so you can record things there. Okay, thank you so much. Lovely audience, thanks.